You are tuning into the Pyramid Mindfucks of Gnosis, welcoming you through the doors of perception into the deja vu known as Aeon Arcanum. We are broadcasting live from the repository of souls in the very heart of the Akashic Record. You best recognize, fools. We are streaming hypnagogic imagery into the minds of lost sheep and anyone else considered mentally healthy. It's not sanitary, but somebody has to do it. Today is May the 31st in the year of our demiurge, 2013. Oh God, I'm getting sick. We are proudly having in-the-body experiences with Orthodox virgins and out-of-the-body experiences with our spiritual members. This is the AA for your daimon, the Viagra for your eidolon, the escape hole for your inner rabbit. Our guest today is the amazingly articulate and talented author and speaker, Anthony Peake. He's here to shatter your mind-forged manacles and release you from that shitcom you call your existence. Because you've got a fever, and the only cure is to cheat the ferryman out of every last penny. Your ass may belong to Jehovah, but your soul belongs to Aeon Arcanum, the Bermuda Triangle of weird science and dangerous gnosis. We are not endorsed by toll collectors, nor do we accept sacrifice. I'm your host, James, with my co-host, Alex, and so it begins again. How you doing today, Anthony?
I'm doing really well, and what's really good is the weather over here in the UK has suddenly turned. We've suddenly got spring. I mean, quite ridiculous at the moment, but yeah, no, it's really great to be linking in with you guys again.
Well, we're glad to have you back, and amazingly, we got you 2 interviews in a row. That's great.
Absolutely. Let's hope you can survive long enough to actually get through the interview by the sound of it. Looks like the Archons have turned you by the throat.
This is the second time I've been sick in the last 2 weeks.
There you go. Get involved in my work, and these things happen all the time.
So the Archons prevented me from making it last time. And
now tell us about this. I think it's important that the listeners out there know exactly why it was, because I'm sure that people think I'm making this up. So James, just explain why you couldn't join us last time.
Basically, every day for the last 2 weeks, something comes up, and every day something would mess up at work, or the bus would drive past out of service. In fact, I had this lady when the bus went past me saying out of service. I was trying to go do some community service. The bus comes by after I had encountered this lady at 7-Eleven. So I'm at the 7-Eleven liquor store, and I'm over there, and this lady looks at me after I walk out, and she was like on drugs or something. I don't know. She was crazy, and she starts laughing at me hysterically, just pointing at me and laughing, and I'm like, oh great, this is the Archons, And then I go to sit by the bus stop, and the bus just drives right past me real fast and says, not in service. And I'm on a deadline. I got to be done by the 25th of June. So there's one. That was what started the whole thing off, and then stuff would happen at work all the time. Someone calls in sick, I've got to cover them, all this other stuff, or then I suddenly get sick out of nowhere. And then I'm trying to do the interview with you, and there was 2 things. The first time it messed up, I couldn't do it because my computer messed up. Then when Alex interviewed you that same day, my internet shut off at exactly 5 a.m. Exactly 5 a.m. pretty much, or it might have been 4, but I think because we were scheduled for 7, right? It shut off at 5. And then I'm waiting there, and by 6 a.m. or 6:30 or something, I fell asleep because I had been trying to get it to work. I'm resetting my router, doing all this stuff, going in through my computer on the browser, checking the modem, and I could not get it. I could not get it to load. And now today, I'm able to get on here, and I'm sneezing and sick, and it looks like you're sneezing too. Now I gave you a virus through the computer.
From LA to West Sussex, or from Scotland to West Sussex, it works.
Apparently, the wind is blowing your way.
It's what Einstein called crazy action at a distance.
What is that?
Crazy action.
I've never heard that yet.
Spooky action at a distance. It was Einstein's attempt to explain something called effectively, when you take 2 subatomic particles and you entangle them, for want of a better term, you can then move the particles to literally the other side of the universe, and if you do one thing to one particle, the other one will react immediately. Now, one of the reasons this came up was that Einstein was very, very unhappy with the way in which classical physics was going in the 1920s and 1930s. And together with two associates called Podolsky and Rosen, he came up with something called the Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen thought experiment, or the EPR experiment. And basically what he effectively said was that the concept of Schrodinger's cat, the idea that a particle becomes a point particle at the act of observation, was completely nonsense. Because effectively, if nothing is observing something, it is still in existence as far as he is concerned. And the EPR paradox was something that he put forward to disprove what he calls spooky action at a distance. Unfortunately, in the late 1970s, an Irish physicist called John Bell came out with something called Bell's inequality, which effectively mathematically proved that Einstein was wrong and that spooky action at a distance does take place. And indeed, in 1981, at the Institute of Optics in Paris, a guy called Alain Aspect did a series of experiments which actually proved that Einstein was wrong, that these particles do communicate instantaneously. Now, the question is, how can they communicate instantaneously if in the different parts of the universe? On top of that, the question simply is, if the speed of communication between the two particles is instantaneous, that effectively means that particles can communicate faster than the speed of light. Of course, is impossible within our modern ideas of physics. But of course, a guy called David Bohm came along in the 1980s, and I think it was the 1980s, and he suggested that at a deeper level reality, the two particles are in fact the same particle. So in which case, if you have a single particle that in our existence looks like two particles, in effect, if you do one thing to one particle, the other one will react instantaneously because it's the same particle. And finally, in this whole mind-blowing little segue that we've got in here, a guy called Richard Feynman, who you're probably aware was one of the top particle physicists in America in the late 20th century. In fact, Feynman was one of the guys that was involved in the work on the Challenger disaster. He once suggested that the whole of the universe is created by one electron traveling at infinite speed. So in which case we get some freaky ideas, because if we're all just one electron, that's why everything is part of everything else. We are all the same thing.
That's even creepier.
Yeah.
It kind of goes to the Higgs boson or boson, like the whole.
Oh yeah, the boson.
With the CERN project I think they shut it down last year, but I mean
they were still doing that when I took astronomy in 08.
No, they're still at it. They're still doing it over in Geneva.
Oh, okay, never mind. I guess I read it wrong. But
no, they shut it down periodically when something doesn't work right.
I think there was some hackers
for repair.
I think some hackers are trying to mess with it or something. But,
yeah, well, it's interesting what exactly they're trying to do there, because the Higgs boson is technically the God particle, the particle that gives everything mass. Because one of the mysteries of science is, why do things have mass? Which may sound a very, very intuitive thing, and why on earth are we questioning these things? But physics does question the basics of exactly why things have mass. And the idea is that the Higgs boson is the thing that gives things mass. But clearly there's something more to this, because the amount of money they're investing in trying to discover what effectively on the surface seems like something of no great importance. And I believe what they're trying to discover here is proof of something called the zero-point field and zero-point energy. And if they can discover zero-point energy, it means effectively there is a virtually unlimitless amount of energy that is available, that exists within the vacuum between subatomic particles. And this is something I'll be discussing in my next book, The Infinite Minefield.
It sounds like it's technology that could be used theoretically to maybe even go to alternate realities or.
Exactly. It's exactly what I believe it can do. And funnily enough, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but Rick Strassman and a few of his associates at the University of New Mexico, and I'm not sure exactly who's done the work now because it's breaking news, it was only released last Thursday, so it's a week old, is that they have finally discovered dimethyltryptamine, that is DMT, one of the world's most powerful known hallucinogenic drugs, or if we'd like to prefer to call them entheogens, has actually now been found in the brain of a live rat. Now, effectively, this means that DMT is an endogenous, that is, an internally generated natural neurotransmitter within the brain. Now, if it's in the brain of a rat, it's going to be in the brain of a live person. Now, if this is the case, we suddenly we have something within our brains that can give us access to alternate realities. Because anybody that takes ayahuasca or DMT will tell you, that you go somewhere else completely different. Now, I believe the completely different place that you go is effectively your brain is drawing up information, or what Bohm would call information, from the 0 point field. And I believe the 0 point field is the program, like the hard drive program, by which this reality exists. In other words, we are effectively living within a computer program. We're living within a computer game. This is a rendered computer game, and the actual hard drive and the information, the digital information, is based within the 0 point field. Now, the ancient the Vedas and the Vedanta will tell you that this is something known as the Akashic record, and it's what Irvin Laszlo calls the Akashic field. And again, this is very exciting stuff, because what this is doing is it's actually showing Gnosticism, isn't it? The idea that this is that we are living within the mind-forged manacles, or what Philip K. Dick would call the black iron prison. Right. We are trapped within this reality, but there is a reality behind the pleroma, and the pleroma is the 0 point field, in my opinion.
Right. So, do you believe in the pleroma? Nothing has mass, or?
Yeah, I think the idea, the concept of mass, both the concept of mass, the concept of time and space, are very much brain created constructs. In other words, it's the brain that creates our idea of time. It's the brain that creates the idea of distance and space. Because again, if we go back to the EPR paradox and we go back to Bell's inequality, the suggestion is that if two particles are 6 inches apart or 6 million light years apart, and effectively they can instantaneously communicate, that suggests that the distance between the particles, i.e. the space between them, doesn't actually exist. It's a brain construct. Now, if that is the case, it means that everything we perceive and everything that's located in space is only located in space because we perceive it to be so. Because Mach, I think he was German, the German mathematician and physicist, very much played this thought game and said, just imagine a circumstance that the universe consists of just one sphere, and that sphere is revolving in space. Space doesn't exist unless there are other objects. In other words, if there were only 2 objects in the universe, right, all that space would be whatever the distance is between those 2 objects. If that one of the objects ceases to exist, space ceases to exist, because space is nothing. It is literally nothing. So therefore, if that is the case, how could if you had a single planet, for instance, how could you know it was revolving? Because you need to revolve against something else. In other words, right, when you are moving, your speed and velocity is calculated against something else. Mm-hmm. Whereas if there was no something else to gauge that velocity or speed by, you're not moving, so you're not going anywhere. The same is the thing with time. Time, when we think about time, it's most peculiar concept, in the sense that everything we normally measure, we measure by other things. You can have a pound of apples. So in which case we know that a pound is something, and it's a measurement that you can take the apples and you can say that's a pound of apples. Time is different. If you think about this, time is the only thing I know that is measured by itself. You can only ever have a minute of a minute or an hour of an hour. There is no objective metric hour that you measure an hour by. So in other words, time is completely and utterly subjective, unless we have the idea that there are different levels of time. I use the analogy as you can't tell a river is flowing, except because there are riverbanks. Right. Time flows. But the reason we know a river flows is because there's riverbanks. Take away the riverbanks, you've got no reference point to know whether the river is flowing at all. And this is the strange thing about time. Right,
yeah. Time has always been a strange concept to me. I think Einstein actually struggled with the idea of time a lot too.
Oh, well, very much. I mean, the thing is as well, again, one of the things we have to discuss about with time is that time, there are 2 forms of time. There's objective external time, that's clock time, but there's also the internal time. There's what's called langue and durée, which was put forward by a French philosopher called Henri Bergson. And the idea is time changes depending upon your mood. Time time can really slow down or can speed up, depending on how you feel. Now, there's been research done on this, and it is known that when you have a fever, time slows down. I think it's right. So it slows down. Time seems to take longer to pass when you have a fever, and this is because time it's directly linked with our metabolic rate. Now, this would explain why smaller animals such as houseflies don't live very long. And this is why when you try to catch a housefly when it flies past you, you won't be able to do so, because the fly is living in a totally different time world. So in other words, it sees us as these huge lumbering creatures that move incredibly slowly. But for a fly, a 70-year lifespan is lived in 2 or 3 days from the relative, and this is why mice move so quickly. So effectively, for each animal's relativity, we all live the same subjective lifespan. It's just that the larger animals are slower.
Right, yeah, that makes sense.
Indeed, a lot of this I discuss in my book, The Labyrinth of Time, which eventually you'll get to read as you work your way through them.
Yeah. I plan on buying them soon, so I'm going to buy one at a time.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, I want to get to I want to read all of them. There's an article that came out a while ago, but it talks about a lot of the same things you're talking about. How there's a scientist by the name of Bostrom. He's an Oxford professor. Basically, he said the same thing that you're saying, that we live in a computer simulation. And I think he first proposed a theory in 2003. I don't know if it's okay with you guys, but I just want to read like a little small snippet of an article. Yeah. Let's see. It says, if our world is a computer simulation, the highest energy cosmic rays would not travel along the edges of the lattice in the model, but would travel diagonally, and they would not interact equally in all directions as they would be expected to. In other words, even supercomputers capable of creating a simulation of the universe would be hobbled by finite resources. And one day we might be able to detect these limits is to look for cosmic rays that don't travel the way that they would be expected to travel. This could explain why there are glitches in the way we live, déjà vu, and the appearances of ghosts and monsters. And the grid could easily burp out some profane forms, and we have to deal with them. This leads to some remarkable, compelling explanations for why we believe certain myths and why they manifest at times without warning. So I thought that was kind of an interesting little snippet of information.
Who was the writer of that? What was his name?
The article is written by Catherine Long, but she was talking about the scientist's name. The scientist's theory in regards to the computer simulation. I mean, I can give you the link.
Okay.
The show, yeah.
What was his name? Bostrom?
Bostrom, yeah.
Oh, it's Nick Bostrom. Yeah, Nick Bostrom. Yeah. No, I'm aware of his work. He's again one of the guys that is arguing that the universe is a computer simulation. Right. In fact, Bostrom, I think, was the guy that first started the whole idea off many years ago when he wrote an incredible paper about this. And again, he does the maths and he does the evidence from cosmology, from what is noticed about the behavior of the universe. And I think I'm right in saying that Bostrom has said that the evidence that we are living in a simulation is overpowering. And who's to say that that's not the case? Would we know? I think I said in my last interview with you guys, and if it wasn't this one, it wasn't with you guys, forgive me, and if I repeat it also forgive me, but there's a friend of mine who runs his own company, and he has a virtual office where his staff come in literally within the virtual office within Second Life, the computer program. And he took me round the offices of his simulated office, and he had one of his avatars sitting in front of a virtual computer screen on the screen. And on the virtual computer screen was a program running of Second Life. And on Second Life was the avatar of his avatar in Second Life. And on that screen was another screen with another version of Second Life running. And then he turned around to me and he said, imagine now there's somebody looking over your shoulder. How do you know that you're not within that situation as well. In other words, there's somebody behind you perceiving it as well.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it's as rational as any other model. There is the big philosophical argument, why does anything exist rather than nothing?
Right.
And there is another argument to say, why on earth have we evolved intelligence? Why have we evolved consciousness, self-consciousness, self-referential consciousness? Because effectively, if the role of evolution is purely and simply to make the most effective life form that works in tandem with its environment and works effectively, we needn't have evolved any further than the amoeba, because the amoeba is a very, very effective living force. It's actually been around for millions of years. It's never needed to evolve or change because it's effective within its environment. So in many ways, the whole idea of consciousness, altruism and everything else do not necessarily sit well within the whole idea of maybe evolution even. Not that I'm against evolution. I believe totally that evolution functions, and I believe it. It's effectively proven. But there are still certain anomalies in it that really don't make necessary sense if we're talking about consciousness within this universe.
Right.
Well, kind of going back to that that little snippet I was talking about, it kind of reminds me of the Matrix Reloaded, when you have I'm always obsessed with the Matrix when I talk about this, but you also have, if you remember the scenes with the ghost twins, and you see like then there's references of werewolves and vampires, and then I mean, like, kind of figured, if we live in a simulation, I guess why not, maybe there are freaky monsters and all this kind of stuff. So,
well, it was something that James was saying earlier on, which he'll probably touch upon now, where he had what we would technically call sleep paralysis, whereby he was in a semi-liminal hypnagogic state, and all these strange things started happening, and he encountered his own demon.
Right.
Maybe James, that's the wonderful opportunity for you to tell me again the things you were explaining to me off camera before.
Well, it was crazy because this was a couple of years ago. I want to say, what is it? It's 2013 now. It was probably in 2010. It must have been about 2010, and it was like fall 2010, somewhere around there. I went to sleep one night. I actually wasn't feeling too well, and in the middle of the night, I woke up, but I couldn't move. I was like, it was like sleep paralysis. So I'm stuck there. I can't move around. I'm just looking around, but I can't go back to sleep. And then I hear someone talking. I'm looking around. I don't see anyone there at first, And then I look in my chair, and there's a figure about my height, my build, but I can't make out any other features, And he's sitting there, and he sounded very angry and very bitter. Had a very harsh tone to his voice, and it was a man, And he's sitting in the chair, and he's talking to me, and I thought it was the devil or something, I was like, what is this? And so he's sitting there talking to me about all the things that are going to go wrong in my future. My girlfriend's going to leave me, and I'm going to lose my money, and I'm going to have a hard time finding a job, and I'm going to move out of California, and I'm going to do all this stuff, and all this stuff ended up happening. So effectively, it was telling me the future. And I at the time, didn't believe it. And I found that there was nothing I could do to change it, though. Even when something would come up to where I was about to move, I thought, well, I don't want to be in California anyway, so I moved to Las Vegas. But I pretty much did everything that it said. My girlfriend did end up leaving me by February, so this was only about maybe 3-4 months after it came to me, And that was 2011. And then it told me that I was going to go to bars and do this and that. I was never the bar type of person. I never went to bars. And so it told me all that stuff. And what's weird is this kind of ties into another experience I had last week, is where I went to a bar and I was playing pool. And this was after work. I just got off work. I went to a local bar. I don't have a car right now, so I figured, I'll go to a local bar. I could walk home. And I'm playing pool with this guy, and I had seen what was going to happen in the pool game. I saw where he sunk the 8-ball into the corner pocket. I called the pocket, and I told him, "You're going." And he must have sunk almost all his balls. I still had I want to say 5 of mine left. And I told him, "You're going to sink the 8-ball in this pocket and lose, and you're going to buy me a drink. I want a Corona with lime. You're going to buy me a drink, after you sink it and lose. And it got down to it where by the time we got through the game, all we had left was the 8-ball. So I kind of thought, well, how could that be possible? There's no chance that he could lose now. Because now he can call the pocket and he can make it, right? And he goes, no, I'm going to sink it in the pocket. You said I'm going to lose it and I'm going to win. And he hit it. And he actually ended up scratching with the 8, which if you played pool, that's a loss. So he actually did end up losing. Even though he had got confident and thought he wasn't going to lose, he still went for that pocket because he wanted to prove he could win there. He ended up sinking it, and he goes, oh, man, you were right. How'd you do that? I go, I don't know. Sometimes I see the future 4 minutes in advance. It happens here and there. It happens to me.
Now, this is intriguing because effectively, I'll ask you one question first. The being that you saw sitting in the chair, what did he look like? Was he older?
Yeah, older. He sounded older. He looked like he was older.
How much older?
Probably in his 60s or 50s. Way older.
Okay, right. I don't know if you're aware of this, that Philip K. Dick, the American science fiction writer, told a tale of at one time when he found himself, he was lying in bed with his wife, and he found himself back in his room when he was, I think, about 10 or 11 years of age, standing at the end of the bed, looking at his younger self. He then remembered, this stimulated him to remember the fact that he recalled when he was younger, being in semi-sleep state, seeing a man standing at the end of his bed.
Right.
Now, effectively what this suggests is that in my next book I'll be arguing very, very strongly that Philip K. Dick was an interesting character and vindicated a great deal of what I write about in my other books. But effectively, here we have a scenario of time being relative, and your older self can manifest in your younger life.
Right.
Now, if this is the case, this effectively suggests that the being you saw there was your daemon. And your daemon is the part of you that has lived your life before. It knows your life. It is effectively the game player. In the computer game, a first-person RPG game, what is taking place is that the game player is your daemon, and you are the Eidolon, which is on screen. And the daemon plays the game. You effectively will get to a point in your life where you'll be killed. And the daemon will then take you back to the date of your birth and will start it all again, as you do when you're playing a computer game. You know,
right. That's what you said happens at the point of death, right?
Yeah, I do.
Reliving your life.
Very much. And what I say is that when you relive your life, you're living within a recording of your life. And it's possible that even your initial life is a recording, but I'm not too sure about the philosophy on that. But effectively, you live your life again as a computer game. And the information's drawn up from the 0 point field, and programmed within the 0 point field is every outcome of every possible decision you can possibly make in your life. Now, this means in effect that you can do anything in your life that is realistically possible. You could have chosen to have actually stayed in California, gone to Los Angeles. You could have chosen to go to Boston. You could have chosen to live in Indonesia. And all those potentials are available for you. Now, again, if people turn around to me and say, oh, that is complete nonsense, how can you possibly say that? That's non-scientific drivel. I point them to something called the top-down hypothesis, which was suggested in 2006 by Stephen Hawking and his associate Frank Hartle, who's a research scientist at CERN. And in the top-down model, what they suggest is that every outcome of every decision is already encoded within the universe, for want of a better term. And your decision collapses the wave function of that particular universe that can accommodate your decision that you've just made. You then make another decision and another wave function is collapsed from the data field, which actually then fulfills that option. So all through our lives, we are making these decisions, we're collapsing wave functions. Now again, to go back, what I mean by collapsing a wave function. According to modern quantum physics and the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum physics, subatomic particles do not exist except in a wave function, which is a statistical wave function that they will exist in one place or another. Until the particle is measured, it does not exist. Now, the question is, what do we mean by measurement? And many philosophers and philosophers of science have said the only thing we can ascertain from what we really mean by measurement is the act of observation by a conscious being.
Right.
So therefore, the reality you perceive outside consists of particles that have been collapsed into point particles. In other words, if you think about it, a wave is a dispersion in space. It's not a physical thing. In other words, a wave in water, the water is what carries the wave. If you take the water away, there is no wave. The question then is, with these wave particles, exactly what these are, and it was Schrödinger, I think, that came up with it. Was it Schrödinger? No, it was no, it was de Broglie. A guy called de Broglie came up with the idea that it's just a wave function of statistics. And the reason they came to this is because of light, because light is very peculiar. Because again, if light is observed or measured, it's a point particle called a photon. In fact, all electromagnetic energy, because light is just part of the electromagnetic spectrum. So therefore, all electromagnetic waves are particles if you observe them, but if they're unobserved, they're waves.
Right.
Now, this is powerfully intriguing, and if you ever want to make a particle physicist shake in his boots and really start to waffle around the subject, this is the thing you bring up. It's called wave-particle duality. They have not got a clue what is happening, and any particle physicist who pretends they do is lying. As Richard Feynman once said, he said, if you think you understand particle physics, you've got it wrong. And Feynman used to say that I'm going to teach you how the world really works, and the world doesn't work in the way that the human mind thinks it should. So in which case, your reality is your reality. So for instance, on the screen now, I can see behind your head, and I can see the books, and I can see everything else. But within your Phaneron, within your worldview, it doesn't exist. The only reason that's bringing that into existence is my act of observation of it.
Right.
Now, what is even more intriguing, though, is, of course, I'm not actually observing it. What I'm doing is observing electromagnetic radiation on a screen. And electromagnetic radiation is created by the Wi-Fi that's in my house. So suddenly you're getting the idea of where reality really is. In fact, the biggest...
at the same time, I'm observing it too.
Yeah, and you're
right.
observing. You turn around and you collapse the wave function of it. Now, Berkeley, the philosopher that set up Berkeley University, he very much came up with the idea of that when nothing is observed, nothing actually exists. In other words, you need an observer for things to exist. If they're not observed, this is why Einstein turned around and said, I cannot believe that the moon isn't there if I don't observe it. But unfortunately, the actual science is telling us that is exactly what takes place. And you know that there is an argument to say that reality is created because we're all observers of it, and we collectively create this reality by us all having our own little bits of the reality which we create and collapse the wave function. So it's intriguing stuff. So the idea is that was your own higher self. That was your daemon telling you that he was hacked off with you. Because he knew you'd probably made an error in your life, and he was so pissed with you that he was pointing out to you, next time round, James, don't do that. Do it another way.
I did it anyway.
You didn't listen to me. I tried in dreams. I tried to tell you. I've got examples. When you read my book, The Daemon, there's example after example out there of individuals who hear a voice in their head, and the voice tells them not to do something. One guy, for instance.
Yeah, I've had that.
Okay, explain. Yeah, come on.
It's just random things. I mean, I can't think of a specific one, but I've had it where I've had like an inner voice in my head telling me, "Oh, don't do this, don't do that," and sometimes I don't do it, and sometimes I do it.
Okay, Alex, you're about to come in there with. Have you had experiences of this?
Yeah, I think I was about maybe 16, 17 years old, and I used to live in, I guess, in some apartments, and it was like literally right next to my high school. It is back when I was living in Washington, D.C. What happened was, I think it was middle of winter, and it was like really slippery, and so but there was just so much traffic in the morning, and so here I was standing right in between traffic. There's this yellow line that you can just, I guess you could just stand there without being run over, hopefully. So, but I guess I was standing too far into traffic. So I had a voice come and tell me that stand back, go back immediately, now. And then I did it, and 1 second, like literally a moment later, a car just swerved by, and it potentially could have just run me over. I mean, I could have been in a wheelchair or worse. I could have been dead, you know. So I just thought that was really interesting. That there was this voice that's telling me, "Oh, the step back, go back," and then here, I survived.
Well, that's it. This phenomenon is so common. When I lecture, I normally, at the end of my lectures, I sit down at the end of the stage or wherever it is, and we just have an hour's question and answer session. And when people feel at ease and they know that the people around them are not going to criticize them about these experiences, suddenly people will start talking about these experiences, and they are phenomenally common. It's just because the society we live in considers to hear voices, or to be precognitive, or to have precognitive dreams. These are all things that do not fit in with our paradigm. And if you admit that you hear or see these things, you're going to get people criticizing you. You're going to get people thinking you're a nut. But the reality of the fact is these things are phenomenally common, and it is about time that humanity woke up to the fact that these things are real. And as soon as we acknowledge they are real, they are empirically real because they are experienced by people. Because, of course, the word empirical means experience, from experience. Right. So if these things are empirically perceived, they are within scientific remit to actually try and understand exactly what they are. Now, science has evolved now with particle physics, quantum physics, and some of the things we now know about neurology. There are ways and means that we think now that we might be able to evaluate and find out what is happening. But to just dismiss them is bad science, in my opinion. You know, and unfortunately, I think we now, the world seems to be splitting into two groups of people. The people that are actually willing to at least accommodate that these phenomena take place. The people who realize that the actual existence of sentient, self-referential consciousness generated by the brain or programmed by the brain or received by the brain is an impossibility. David Chalmers is an Australian philosopher, and he calls this the hard problem of neurology. How can what is effectively inanimate matter inside my head with electrical impulses going through it bring about the concept of me, Anthony Peake, with my hopes, my fears, my memories, and everything else? And it's the same with you guys. You know you're sentient. You know you relate to the universe. You know you think. You know that you are real, and you know that you are a consciousness. Consciousness cannot be explained because it cannot be measured. It doesn't have extension in space. It is just something that seems to be an epiphenomenon of the brain. Now, there are certain philosophers, such as Daniel Dennett, who will turn around and say, in his book Consciousness Explained, that it's an illusion, that we're not conscious at all. We are literally fooling ourselves into thinking we're conscious. Of course, then that begs the question, how can you fool something that's not conscious? But he never goes that far, because the people never take things to the next logical step. Rant over.
Kind of reminds me of that old Zen koan. If a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, it doesn't make a sound. You know.
Well, it doesn't. If you think about that to its logical conclusion, it doesn't. And the reason it doesn't is that sound is processed by the brain. In other words, the sound itself, all it does is it's vibrations in the air that cause vibrations in the eardrum, which is then converted into electrical stimuli, which go into the brain, which then recreates the sensation, the qualia of a sound of a tree falling. Mm-hmm. But trees don't make sound naturally. In a vacuum, there's no sound anyway. In fact, colour is an illusion. There is no colour. Colour does not exist anywhere. Colour is literally the way in which the human brain processes a certain vibrational state within the electromagnetic spectrum. Right. But it does not exist out there. The natural state of everything is colourless. You know, and that's again something that people really don't grasp. You can argue for hours with people. Where is red? And people will argue with you and say, oh, it's there. That object is red. No, it's not.
It's kind of funny because I actually mix paint at work once in a while. And when people come in looking for paint, they'll hand you a thing and they'll say, oh, I want this blue right here and it's red. I go, that's red. And they go, no, it's blue.
Yeah.
They go, I want that blue right there. I'm like, oh, I'll get you that blue, sir, but it's red.
And it's
People
because,
observe color completely different.
well, yeah, and it's because, isn't it, effect, that your blue might be totally different to my blue, but there's no way we can
Right.
objectively ever describe it because you can't describe blue. It's
Right.
like a very, very famous quotation. I don't know if it's that famous.
You can't describe color to a blind man either.
That's the point. You can't. I mean, there's a famous song by, I can't think of the guy's name now. He was the lead singer of a really big band, and he has a song called that, explaining blue to a blind man. And the issue is even more precise because for a blind person, I remember once being told that a blind child turned round and asked her mother what colour the wind was. Because for a congenitally blind person, they're told that everything has colour, and then you've got to turn around and say, but certain things don't have colour, even though you can feel them, because you can feel the wind blowing against you, so it must have colour. But of course it doesn't, and we completely accept that. It's transparent. You can see through it, but it's still physically there. These are the mysteries of how consciousness creates internally the world. There are people out there called naive realists, and naive realists are people who believe that the world out there is what they are told by their senses. It's not. Whatever it is, it is not what our senses tell us. It is something completely different. A guy called Thomas Nagel wrote an article a few years ago called What It Is Like to Be a Bat. And this was the first article that really made people question what it is to be a conscious being, because the world to a bat is completely different to the world as we see it. The world for a honeybee, colours for a honeybee are completely different to how we see the world. And this is the important fact. We're just scratching the surface of trying to understand what is really going on. We think because we give things labels that we understand them. Hallucination. You've just had an hallucination. Don't worry about it. It's an hallucination. Oh, well, therefore, party over. It's explained, isn't it? Right. Only you can't explain hallucinations because they don't know why hallucinations occur. They don't know why anesthetics work, for God's sake.
Right, that's more of a dismissal than a...
Pardon?
It's more of a dismissal. It's more like circular logic. I hallucinated. Oh, therefore it's a hallucination.
Yeah.
It's very circular thinking.
Totally. And this is the kind of the trap that modern science and modern materialist reduction has got into us. It's the idea of trying to find consciousness in the brain. That's like trying to take a motorcycle apart to find speed. It doesn't work, does it? It doesn't work. Consciousness, the brain is somehow, I believe, the brain is a receiver. The brain receives information and it processes information. Where we are is the great question. Where your consciousness is located. The only reason you think your consciousness is in your head is purely and simply because your eyes are in your head. Right. And you see the world. If you had eyes on your kneecap and ears at the side of your kneecap, you would genuinely believe that you were located in your knee.
Right, yeah.
So, you have to expand from that. Now, yes, the brain is inside. And yes, of course, if the brain gets damaged, there are certain things that people can't do. People get Alzheimer's, people get dementia, people have damage to their brains. But I argue that damage to the brain can sometimes bring about abilities to understand the world in a different way. People who have temporal lobe epilepsy, people who have migraine. People who
I get migraine.
Do you? Intriguing. Do you get classic migraine? Do you get the whole aura effect? And
I get the aura effect if it doesn't go to a full-on headache.
Interesting. I think that's why.
If I make it to a headache, then I won't. But when I get the aura effect, I had it at work one day, and I work in the lighting section at my work, and that's where I work most of the time. And I was. If I stay on the aisles too long in the lighting aisles, I'll get the aura sensation. I won't get a full-on headache, but my body temperature will go up a little bit, and I'll see what look like fairies. They're just little lights that fly around. And I'll see auras around people, like a blue aura or pink aura, stuff depending on their mood, and then I'll see I saw the little lights. I saw a group of them come together. They gathered together. They got into this little like pack of lights, and then they flew down the aisle. I saw them fly away.
Interesting. Now, the technical explanation for that, the thing's called scotomas. And because I get classical migraine as well, so I completely relate to what you're seeing there. I don't get that kind of visual. I just get crisscross patterns and I go partially blind.
I get that too.
You really need to read. There's a book called Migraine, written by Oliver Sacks, the psychiatrist, which is well worth getting hold of if you're a migrainer. In fact, in my next book, I'm suggesting that Philip K. Dick was a migrainer, and a lot of the things that took place to him on 2374 and subsequently when he had his theophany, I think was migraine related. But I think what migraine does is it actually opens up the brain to perceive things that normal people, in raised commas, don't see.
I get headaches here too, right here, where my head only hurts here.
All right, which would explain migraine, which of course means half head. You know, so
Right.
now migraine to me is one of the. I have a term I use which I call the scale of transcendence, and I consider that there's normal, which is the vast majority of people. Then you have migraine, which is the doors of perception. What Aldous Huxley called the doors of perception, using the concept that was first put forward by William Blake. The doors of perception are slightly open when you have migraine. When you become bipolar, they become more open. When you have temporal lobe epilepsy, they become wider open. And then when you become schizophrenic, the doors are absolutely wide open. And I think what happens there is somebody who has schizophrenia, who acquires schizophrenia, is perceiving the universe as it really is. In other words, they're seeing the breakdown of exactly the holographic nature of external reality. Sometimes this is why you get these kind of images when you have migraine. The hologram is starting to break down. Your perceptions are starting to see that the holographic nature of what you are seeing, the external world you're perceiving within. And of course, what happens with schizophrenia is that the information coming in is so overpowering that literally people go crazy because they can't deal with it. They're existing within almost like a continual dimethyltryptamine trip.
Right.
You know, where they're encountering greys, they're encountering entities, they're encountering the machine elves all the time. They're hearing voices all the time. Now, I think your voice hearing there, probably both of you, you know, was to do... I mean, Alex, do you get migraine as well?
Not really, not necessarily, but I've had really terrible maybe this was like maybe 3 years ago. I had a really terrible migraine. It was like actually behind my eye. I don't know if that's anything.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like a stabbing pain that. Just yeah, I don't know. It just really screwed with my head. I never had it since, but I don't know. I thought it was really strange. So it just happened, you know, out of nowhere.
Well, it's just I was intrigued as to how your voice was manifesting when it saved you that day when you were walking across the road. And the only thing I can think of is that sometimes daemons can be much more effective in communication. And I think this is to do with the communication channels between the dominant and non-dominant hemispheres of the brain. Because I generally believe that the daemon is located in the non-dominant hemisphere. And again, if you look back to the split brain operations of Michael Gazzaniga and Roger Sperry and various other individuals, it was known that if you cut the corpus callosum of the brain, which is the kind of muscular body, the nerve fiber that holds the two sides of the brain together, you effectively get two individuals. Now, this has profound implications because if we are two individuals, and we are permanently two individuals, it's just that ordinarily your dominant hemisphere, ordinarily your left hemisphere, is dominant. But sometimes the non-dominant hemisphere can take over. I mean, there's something called alien hand syndrome, where people who have had strokes actually have the circumstances where their left hand chooses different types of clothing from their right hand. And there's a wrestling going on, where the hand is going out to grab one dress. A woman, you know, she wants to wear one dress, but the non-dominant hemisphere wants to wear something else. So again, there's a lot of neurological evidence. There's also the evidence that the daemon exists with when people go into very, very deep hypnotic states. The further down you go in certain hypnotic states, at a certain point, there was somebody called Erickson that worked on this, that you will encounter something he called the hidden observer. This being that exists, that can see things that you can't ordinarily see. It's the witness to your life. Again, this is the daemon. As you probably know, in my first book, this is what I talk about. So there's strong evidence for all this. There's nothing I do in my writing that isn't based upon science. I'm not channeling information from the planet Tharg. I'm not talking to 7,000-year-old Atlantean goddesses. I'm actually dealing with the science. And this is why a lot of people are very, very scared of what I do, because they can't put me down in the same way they can put down a lot of these New Age woo-woos. Because
Hey,
I'm
the
dealing with
collective
the...
unconscious right here just kicked in. You creeped me out because right when you said that, I was actually just contemplating asking you about Socrates and the Atlantean spirits. I was looking at it right on my paper, thinking about asking what your take on it was, and you just gave it to me right now.
That's exactly my feeling on it. What I believe is happening here, now believe me, I do not dismiss people who have spirit guides. I do not dismiss people that have manifestations within their mind. But if you apply the Damon Eidolon concept to this, it is self-evident that what they're listening to is their daemon. It is their daemon that's manifesting within their lives in a way that is easy for them. If their daemon feels that they're at ease because it's a 7,000-year-old Atlantean mystic, that's what it will come as. It will also come to you as Elvis Presley. I'm quite intrigued, the number of people in America now that when they're dying, the being of light is Elvis Presley. In years gone by, it was Jesus Christ. Now it's Elvis
Reminds
Presley.
me of True Romance. The movie True Romance, where he has Elvis with him. Elvis is talking to him while he's in the mirror, and Elvis is his daimon.
There you go. Exactly, you know, and Elvis could be a pretty good daemon for everybody, I think, you know. Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I don't dismiss this, and I do a lot of work with very, very talented mediums, and I've been discussing with them their spirit guides, their medium guide, and when you look at it very, very objectively, you'll find that they're actually channeling information from somewhere else that's outside of themselves, but is very much part of them. Again, you know, this model works, you know, because it's tied in with near-death experience, it's tied in with so many other things, but it has a very strong explanatory power, from deja vus to precognitions to voices in the head, in my opinion anyway.
James, tell him what your deja vu experience with me and Anthony in regards to Amani.
Okay.
Do you
I
remember
don't
that?
remember. Remind me. I don't remember because
Okay, well,
my deja vus are like, if I don't write it down, I'll forget about it.
okay, well, you sent me in a text that you had a deja vu experience that. Remember when I mentioned Amani to him, he said that I was the first person to mention.
Oh, right. Yeah, I dreamed it the night before that you guys. I actually dreamed the night before. Actually, no, I dreamed it when I fell asleep, the day that you guys did the interview. I'm pretty sure it was either that or the day before. I think it was the same day. While you guys were doing the interview, I was sleeping and dreaming about him asking you the Manny question that he asked you.
Wow.
On the last interview, right? Yeah. Okay, now I remember what you're saying. That's I get trippy stuff like that all the time, and I'll forget. If someone reminds me though, I'm like, oh, got it. Yeah.
That's deliberate, you know. Effectively, again, if you look at the work of an American,
I wasn't supposed to be on the last interview. I wasn't supposed to be there.
But you were tuned into it.
Right, exactly.
There is a guy, an American guy called Art Funkhauser, that lives in Bern in Switzerland, and Art he's one of my major intellectual heroes. His papers are wonderful, and the way he thinks is incredible. And he effectively is a physicist. His PhD is in physics. He was an expert again on holograms and holographics. But effectively, he has something he calls the dream theory of deja vu, or technically deja vu.
Oh, wow.
He's already lived. And the dream theory is that you've had a dream recently that's precognitive. And when you start to live in three-dimensional reality, your dream that you dreamt about, you'll suddenly have this recognition. And the reason it's confusing is because you've forgotten the fact you've had the dream. So this is why you have this kind of, I've been here before. It's because you've had a precognitive dream. Now, again, if you look at the technical definition of deja vu, which was put forward by a guy whose name escaped me, who actually lives in Seattle. His name will come to me in a second. And it is basically, I can never remember it exactly, but it is an unbidden recognition from a time in your past that is unknown, that you've had this thing before. Now, if that's the case, this is why you forget them. You forget them because you're supposed to forget them, because they're glitches. They are either it's your daemon trying to warn you of something. I've had examples of people. There's one guy I know who has, and it's more important to me now than when I was first told it. He has a small tumour on his pineal gland, and again, he's a guy training to be an astrophysicist, and he has deja vu sensations or deja vu sensations where he knows what's going to happen for the next 30 seconds, and once he gets into this mind state, he can't break out of it. He knows he can actually say word for word what people are going to say to him. And I said to him, now this is intriguing, because I said to him, if you know what somebody's going to say to you in the future, why don't you say something? Why don't you say to them, this is what you're going to say? And he was quite right. He said, if I did that, they wouldn't say it. And it's true. Because if I turn around to you and I say, this is what you're going to say now, you'll say, oh, really?
Right.
Which wasn't what you were going to say in the first place. And as he argued, he said, at that point, I've split the universe. There was the universe that would have gone ahead with the person saying what they said, but the new universe was the one where they said, oh, really? And this again shows the nature of the multiple universes, the multiple worlds hypothesis, the top-down hypothesis of Hertog and Hawking. These things make sense, but it's only when they make sense when you realise. And what you have to do with these kind of deja vu sensations is write something down. Yeah. Because I was on a live radio programme in the UK on BBC Radio Merseyside doing a programme on deja vu, and a guy phoned in and he explained that he started to go into a deja vu state where he knew what was going to be happening for the next 10 seconds, 15 seconds. And he went outside of his room and he wrote down what his wife was going to say to him when he went back into the room, and he put it on a piece of paper, walked in, just handed it to her. She said the words. She then opened up the piece of paper, and the words she said were written on the piece of paper, because of course his actions then did not stop what she was going to do. So the question is with this, is a deja vu a short-term precognition? Is it a glitch in our ability to perceive time? Because there's been a lot of work that's been shown that the human brain functions at least 0.5 of a second after reality. Right. But recent research has shown it could be as much as 8 minutes.
Yeah.
Now, this is intriguing stuff. There's a guy called Peter de Sautoy that did a TV program on this, and there's a guy, I think, in Germany that's doing work whereby the brain knows. The brain doesn't even need consciousness to do things. It's why you jump when you hear a bang. You don't think, oh, I'm going to jump because I've heard a bang. The body does it anyway. Yeah. But the weird thing about those things is most times you jump before you hear the sound. Have you noticed? You go, oh, and then you hear the sound. That's again because the brain buffers information before it processes it to the brain.
Right.
You know, so this again is intriguing stuff. And again, if people want to check this out, look up the Phi experiment, P-H-I experiment by von Grunau. And there's a series of there's the Dean Radin Beerman experiments that took place in the mid 1990s, where they showed that people would react, their skin conductancy would react to a bad photograph they were about to be shown 0.5 of a second before they saw it.
Right.
Now, this is intriguing stuff. It again comes back to what is time, you know, and what is perception.
Oh, just like when people are staring at you, you can sense it.
Yeah, the sense of being stared at.
Right.
Morphogenic fields. It's something put forward by a guy called Rupert Sheldrake. And Sheldrake's work is staggering. We all know this. A friend of mine used to sit in bars and stare at people until they turned round. Yeah, you can do it. It works. You know, don't you, that somebody's looking at you.
Right.
Just like you go into a room and you know people have been arguing. You just sense the atmosphere. You know there's an argument taking place.
And you can suggest things to people too. If you're suggestive enough with your language, you can get them to do the things you say.
Oh, totally. This is why magic. Like this is how illusionists work. You know that they very much know how the human brain works. Have you ever seen the video of the gorilla?
Which one is that?
Okay. I'll probably ruin it now because I've just given it away. I will send you a link, or I'll put the link up on YouTube or on Facebook or wherever. there is what you're asked to do is there's a short film being shown, and it's a group of people bouncing a ball between each other. There's about 4 or 5 people, and there's a basketball, and they're bouncing it between them. And what you're asked to do is to count the number of bounces that take place. Okay? So you watch the film, and as you're watching it, you count the number of bounces. And at the end, you'll say there were 15 or there were 16. 95% of people do not see something else as they're watching the film. As they're doing it, a man in a gorilla suit walks into the center of the video, stands in front eyesight, bangs his chest, goes "Rrr," and walks away. When you tell people that, they go, no, there was no gorilla, no, no, no. And then they watch it again, and there's the gorilla. That shows how the human brain does not see things.
Oh yeah, it hones in on what you're focusing on.
Yeah.
That's why in a retail outlet people can miss theft, because they're so used to seeing all the customers just holding items.
They can miss
down an aisle and everyone's holding an item, right? And they're just looking at something, staring off into all the items that are on the wall, right? And that's why you won't see them steal something, because you're used to seeing people opening packages and holding things and yada yada.
I thought you said they missed death.
Oh no, you missed some stealing stuff.
Oh right, I was thinking
it's like congested nose, probably.
You know, you're wandering around, and because you don't see death, it doesn't get you. Oh right, I'll remember.
Oh no. That'd be crazy. Wow, that's weird that you heard it that way. It's probably because my stuffy nose.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, people won't notice people stealing because they're so used to homing in on what they see every day. They always see people holding items, looking through them, blah blah blah. So no, you don't notice the theft. Yeah, sounds like death. There you go. See, that's why.
Do you know, I always find it quite weird when I'm doing interviews like this, and I look at my own image, and my eyes look black. Are they looking black to you?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it?
It's probably the resolution. Mine do that too sometimes. They're kind of doing it now. Mine look way darker than they really are.
Yeah,
my eyes are actually really light in person.
Yeah, mine are green. You know.
Yeah, mine are like really light brown hazel.
Yeah, so. Ooh, yeah, you can see them there, but as you move away...
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Jesus, I'm getting old, you know. You can actually see the crab feet around my eyes. Jesus, this is bad. This is bad. I don't want to be old. I'm still 21. Do you know, I'm 60 in 10 months' time. I find that absolutely horrific. Absolutely horrific. Nobody should be 60. It's awful. It's awful.
Yeah, my dad was 63 when he passed away, but...
Hopefully
I don't know. Hopefully you'll make it into your hundreds.
Yeah, maybe. But I'll be just going round again, won't I? I'll be doing this interview again and again.
Well, you look a hell of a lot healthier for 60 than he did when he was 60. So
yeah, it's having a much younger. She'll kill me for this, but it's having a much younger wife. It keeps you.
Well, as long as we observe you looking young and healthy, and everyone observes you looking young and healthy, maybe you stay young and healthy. The power of observation.
State of mind. State of mind.
Now, this might be a little off topic, but are you familiar with the Mothman prophecies by chance? Because
Mothman? Oh yeah, absolutely. John Keel.
Because everything you said kind of reminds me of that.
Oh, totally. You know, the John Keel book was amazing, and indeed the movie itself was quite good as well. Keel died around 2 or 3 years ago, which is most unfortunate because he's a guy I'd have loved to have spoken to. Because the Mothman prophecies are weird. It was the collapse of the bridge, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I forget which town it was. Some it starts with an S, but
yeah, somewhere in New Hampshire. Was it New Hampshire, something like that?
I think it was New Hampshire, but I know in the movie you have Richard Gere. He's in the movie, and the movie's really great. But you know, he would have conversations with this being, and he would tell him what's going to happen in the future. So everything you kind of described kind of reminds me of that.
And it was based upon real facts as well, wasn't it? So again, we have evidence again of the daemon. And indeed, somebody I was talking to recently, which I think we touched upon during our last interview, is Whitley Strieber. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you can link Strieber's experiences with the Greys, with the aliens. And, of course, we would argue, you know, as Gnostics, you could actually turn around and say, well, you know, they're just form of Gnostic entities. They're Archons. The machine elves that Terence McKenna talked about. Right. You know, these entities seem to exist within this kind of liminal space that probably is just as real as anything else. But effectively, you know, again, time and time again, you have evidence in movies of and novels of my hypothesis. I mean, this is one of the things. It's very much out there within the zeitgeist. You know, from Vanilla Sky to I don't know, the Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Right.
Michael Gondry film.
Minority
These
Report.
movies. Pardon?
Minority Report.
A Minority Report.
Yeah.
No, totally. Which again is Philip K. Dick.
Philip K. Dick. Yeah.
And Philip K. Dick influenced so many people, like the Wachowski brothers. You know, they were massively influenced by Philip K. Dick.
Yeah.
And again, Philip K. Dick was a Gnostic. You know, again, you read the exegesis, he says time and time again. You know, he has the concept of Sophia. You know, Sophia manifests herself in the book Valis, you know, where the little girl gets killed and she's the manifestation of God. In fact, his most Gnostic novel, as far as I'm concerned, was The Divine Invasion, where you had to actually have a little boy called Emmanuel, who is the God that's forgotten he's God. You know, again, this is a very, very central concept, isn't it? The idea of amnesis, the idea that you remember the fact of who you are or what you are, but you've forgotten what you are.
Right.
You know, because I would argue... Sorry, yeah?
Very Gnostic.
Yeah, you know, it's... and if you then take it back, the Gnostic elements into the Kabbalah, and, you know, you take about the idea of how the Kabbalists see the world, how the Sufis see the world. You know, effectively, Gnosticism is the universal religion. It's the religion that actually makes sense. It's the religion that can explain, the concept of evil. You know, if there's a good God, how does evil possibly exist? How can a good God tolerate the existence of evil? You know, there is, again, a technical term for this. The something or other, where, you know, how can evil exist? But of course the Gnostics would explain that this is the creation of Yaldabaoth, isn't it? You know, that we are in the world of Yaldabaoth, the demiurge, the person who thinks he's God, but in fact he isn't. And I know that Miguel Connor and I have had long discussions about this, both privately and on interviews like this, as to, you know, whether you can apply this structure to science, and whether you can apply this structure to reality, to consciousness. Because, of course, everything is a myth. And, of course, a myth is a way of explaining deeper truths by analogy. You know, so who knows on this?
Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about the daimon so much, so because in early Gnosticism, there's about 3 people that I can remember that are reported of saying that they had, you know, demonic experiences or demon guides. And that was Simon Magus, Marcus the magician, and Carpocrates. And that's in the early days of Gnosticism. That's in the 1st and 2nd century. These guys are being reported of interacting with their demon or their daimon or their familiar spirit, or sending dreams to people. Yep. There's this dream sender tales too. And in the Gospels you see that Jesus sends a dream to Pilate's wife. So you've got that. Or Paul is sent a dream by one of his followers in the Acts of the Apostles. So there's a lot of weird little daimon stuff and familiar spirits and just things like that going on in the early church.
Very much so, and you have the idea of Thomas. I mean, Thomas, his twin. You know, effectively we have the argument that Jesus was not one individual, but was 2. You know, and he had his twin. You know, so you have, and we were discussing, I think last time we were Manny. And thanks for all that paperwork you sent through, by the way. It's really brilliant. I went through a lot of that. It's really good stuff. Really excellent stuff. Yeah, no problem. Lots I wasn't aware of, you know. So really, that was superb.
What did you send? What did you send?
Oh, I have like a whole bunch of PDFs from different articles that I collected from. There's an online website. I mean, yeah, I think you have to pay for it, but I have to have a school account for it. It's called JTOR, and I downloaded a shitload of Manichaean Gnostic articles. You know,
you gotta send me those.
Yeah,
well worth reading. I mean, Manny's concept of Al-Tuam, the twin, you know, and his idea of his twin manifested itself and guided him and everything else. But you can take this through. For instance, there are a group of friends of mine who are planning to make I wrote a film script on the life of Joan of Arc called The Voice. And if you look at Joan of Arc and her life, she's a classic example of somebody that had a daemon that was manifest in her life. and the daemon guided her. The daemon showed her where to find a sword that was hidden underneath inside a church. The daemon guided her through her life until she ceased to follow his examples and suggestions, and I think she decided to try and escape from a tower, and she jumped out the tower and broke her leg or something. I can't remember exactly what it was. And from then on, the voice divorced itself from her. And I think that was the point where the daemon had decided, we've cocked up again this time round. We've got to go back to the start again. She's done it again. She's jumped out the tower, and she's going to get burned, and it's really bad news. I want her to survive, have lots of kids, and be nice. So it got to go back to the start of the game again. So
it reminds me of Assassin's Creed. The whole thing reminds me of Assassin's Creed. Everything you're saying right now, it's like when the Atlantean spirit of Minerva comes to you in Assassin's Creed. She's telling you how the world's going to end and how it ended, and it already has ended, but it's going to end because she's from the future. It's really, but she's from the past at the same time.
Well, this is how I think the modern generation. People say to me, "Do you wish you'd written your book 30 years ago when you were a younger man?" And I'd argue that if I had written it then, people wouldn't get it. Yeah. You've got to have examples that you can give, like Second Life, like first-person computer games. I mean, I very much use the archaic example of the first
Which didn't exist 30 years ago.
No, so nobody would have understood. Whereas now we can actually appreciate the concept of an avatar. In many ways, the movie Avatar was brilliant for that. The idea that you can download your brain and consciousness and awareness into something else.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
So
okay, that leads me to, what do you think of Ray Kurzweil and the Singularity?
I don't know about it. Tell me.
Oh my God, he doesn't know about Ray Kurzweil.
No.
Wow. Hey, do you have a Nook by any chance?
I have a Kindle and an iPad.
I wonder if I can loan, because I have the book on my Nook and it lets you loan it out once.
Oh right, okay,
so
yeah.
Maybe I can loan you the book.
Please, if you're allowed to.
Because I don't know how to make it into PDF, but if I'm allowed to, I'm going to loan you the book. Because Ray Kurzweil talks about the point where man merges with machine. Because eventually, man won't be able to keep up with technology. Like the technology we have now, it's going to grow exponentially towards the year 2050, 2045, whatever his prediction is. And so what will happen is they'll get to a point where every day it'll be going up so fast that man won't be able to keep up with it, because man doesn't have the computing capabilities in his mind to even use the software that'll be coming out. And he doesn't have the time in the day because it takes him too long to process information. So eventually he'll need to process information at the speed of the computer or whatever he's using. So the idea is that man has to merge with machine by augmentation. So you need to, like Google Glass, for example, you need to have an augmentation. Eventually, you'll need to have robotic legs so you can run faster, yada yada. But most of it's mental stuff, So he proposes that there's going to be 3 revolutions, which are the revolutions in genetics, nanotechnology, and robotics. So he calls it the G and R revolutions, right? So the idea is that eventually these 3 things will have to merge to be effective. So you'll be able to put in nanobots to change your genetic makeup into your bloodstream, nanocells. And they'll course through your blood, and you're going to hear the mark of the beast stuff with this, of course, eventually, right? But it'll get rid of it'll rewrite your genetic code. So what it'll do is where there's an A where it shouldn't be, or a G or whatever you have, it'll change it to what it should be. So it'll get rid of cancer, or it'll get rid of heart disease, et cetera, or it'll get rid of whatever kind of disease you have that's caused by genetics. And then the idea is that they can use robotics. So if someone's born without legs, give them legs that function and look like human legs. So cybernetics, right? And then eventually what happens is that computers will catch up to like say they build machines, right, or robots. They build robots. They're already building robots, right? And there's actually some crazy videos on YouTube of this robot they built in like Russia. It looks completely real. Moves like a real.
I've seen the Japanese one, which is intriguing.
Yeah. And they had to actually leave the rest of it except for the face uncovered because it looks so real that no one would be able to tell. And so eventually, so the thing is that the computing capacity of these robots is like 10 to the 18th power or something, right? 10 to the 10th power. I don't remember what it is, but it needs to go up like 8 notches, like from 10 to the 10th to 10 to the 18th power in computing process, their processing skills, which is what a human functions at. So when a human functions at a level to where not only can we do all the tasks that we do, but we can actually take in new information constantly, whereas a robot doesn't take in new information constantly. What they do is they just function what they're programmed at. Well, once their computing capacity is high enough, they can function like a human. They can remember things. They can feel emotions. They have to have that computing capability that we have, that our brain has. And then it gets to the point where they can't tell the difference between man and machine. So you've got something like Blade Runner, right?
Yeah.
That's why I figured you might know something about it. But if you don't, you should read it. You'll probably find it fascinating.
No, totally. I know the name, but that's it. And when you were talking then, I was reminded, if we extrapolate from this and we apply Moore's law to, and I mentioned this in The Infinite Minefield, my next book, that they've managed to, by using computer power, they've managed to reproduce a very small, tiny area of the universe using computer power. Yeah, and I can't remember the size of it now, but it's absolutely minute. But effectively, if we apply Moore's law, that computing power doubles every 2 years, and I think it's now moved to 3.
Right, yeah, he talks about Moore's law.
Yeah, so effectively, you apply that 200 years in the future, and if the growth continues exponentially, and of course the idea is how small you can get things, but effectively, you could be in a position, you could effectively model a universe,
right,
computer programming-wise. Now, if that is the case, then it is logical to conclude that the people in the future will decide to model a universe and create a universe. If they then choose to create a universe, they will be happy to create a universe peopled by people who are sentient, because the programming would allow them to do that. Now, if they were able to do that, that would then explain what this is. That this is a computer in the future. Now, again, I think this is what Bostrom talks about, but it very much leads in to the Teilhard de Chardin concept of the Omega point and where we're evolving towards. But also, there is a book, and again, The Physics of Immortality. I think it's by John Wheeler. And in this, he suggests that when human beings have evolved to such an extent, as this stuff is saying, that we've ceased to be human in the sense that we've become machines, what will then happen is that instead of being machines, we'll populate ourselves within three-dimensional recreations of reality in which we can feel human, and in which case we can have a life and we can experience a life as it would have been. Because effectively, if every experience that every human being has had is downloaded into the 0 point field, and because energy doesn't, it just changes form, that means everything that you've thought and felt in your life is readily available and can be recreated again. And it can be recreated in a computer program that you could exist within, and you would feel you were you. The question is, would you know were you? And this is a huge question of philosophy. Would you be sentient, or would you be a zombie? The idea, it's going back to the Turing test, isn't it? The idea of how can I know if somebody else is actually sentient? If they respond to my questions in the way I would expect them to, how could I know? And this comes back again to...
that reminds me of Blade Runner too.
Yeah, Blade Runner. The Voight-Kampff test. And the idea of can you tell whether somebody has empathy? And of course, that is a really excellent test, because
can you fake empathy?
And can you fake empathy? And it then becomes very, very intriguing. We're dealing with incredibly deep philosophical concepts here. But this is what shakes my tree. This is exactly why I write my books, because the things we are discussing here are the things that are so important. These are things that are coming down to the point of what is it to be human? What do we define as being human? If we're a cyborg, are we still human? When we become RoboCop, how far is it before we become a cyborg? Have you read the Philip K. Dick short story, An Electric Ant, at all?
Which one is it? I'm sorry.
The Electric Ant.
Oh, no, I haven't read that one.
Okay, if you can get hold of it, actually, funnily enough, Marvel Comics did a fantastic graphic novel based upon it. And it's this guy that realizes he's a cyborg.
Oh, right,
And he
right,
opens up
right.
his chest, and he finds inside his chest this little machine that has a kind of a punch tape. And as he pulls the punch tape, his reality starts to speed up, and he slows it down.
Didn't Marvel just make that? And aren't they making a movie out of that?
Yeah, no, they made a comic out of it.
I think they're making a movie too.
Are they? Because the intriguing point is because what he then does is he then cuts the tape and takes a section out of it. And when he does so, his reality breaks down. Now, again, this is the genius of Philip K. Dick, because what Philip K. Dick here is applying, again, the ideas of Gnosticism, the idea of how I perceive reality. Is it being downloaded into my head in some way? You know, and again, I was in contact with the guy who designed that comic. His name escapes me now, but I had a chat with him, and he sent me a few emails about the background to why he made the comic. But it's again going back to Philip K. Dick and the idea of what is real, what is it to be human, what is empathy, and these are hugely important questions that humanity has to address in the next 20, 30 years, because the technology is going to run away with us. Yeah, and it really is. It's running away with us now. The very fact that we can do this now, this would be unthinkable.
Oh, yeah.
10, 15 years ago, you know, would be impossible. And we still get
This was like nearly unthinkable 5 years ago.
Yeah, but we still get colds. We are still organic machines.
Yeah, right.
You know, again, Philip K. Dick had this wonderful concept in his book, Ubik, where a lot of the characters are living in half-life. They are, again, what I said in my book. They're living an existence in the bardo state just before they die. You know, so they're in that position. And how would we know whether we're in the bardo state or not? Putin, the ferryman, suggests we are. You know, so...
Yeah, a lot of ghosts, they seem like they don't even know they're dead, you know? Like, if something,
Yeah.
I guess, like, something traumatic happens to them, if they're murdered or they commit suicide or whatever, I mean, they're just like, they're totally oblivious to that, the fact that they're dead, or, you know, in between the realms, between the...
This is exactly what my mediums tell me, you know, and because my next book, I'm going to be writing a book with Irving Laszlo, Professor Irving Laszlo, and the theme of the book is going to be, can we prove that consciousness is outside of the brain? And I'm doing a lot of the historical analysis and everything else for the book, and I'm talking to spiritual mediums, I'm talking to out-of-the-body experiences, I'm talking to various individuals. And of course it still comes down to this question: if you are dead and you don't know you're dead, you are going to hang around, you're going to stay here because you're not sure where you're going or what you are, you know. And I believe that it's more complex than that. I don't think that people die because you die in time. If time is a construct of the mind, and if time is something that can speed up or slow down depending upon our mental state, if your time slows down at the point of death to such an extent that time, virtually the last second of your life can last 70 years, to you, effectively you never get to the point of death. It's Zeno's bisuction paradox. You never get there. We live in smaller and smaller pieces of time. Now, there is an argument to say that there is a point where time itself loses it doesn't exist anymore because there's no more space for time to be filled in. But if space and time are some kind of brain-generated illusions, who knows? In which case, this is how past lives could work. You know, effectively, when somebody is regressed back into a past life, what they're doing is they're tuning in to the 0 point field at a certain point within the program where they pick up somebody else's life and they perceive it. And the final analysis, and this is where I'm going with my next book, is I believe that we're all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively anyway, the old Bill Hicks idea. And I believe that this is the case. We're living in this soap opera created by an entity that is bored with its life because it's got nothing to do, so it's created us. And it sees the world through our eyes. And it forgets the fact, as Emmanuel does in The Divine Invasion, the Philip K. Dick book. He doesn't know he's God. He's blissfully unaware of the fact he's God. You know, and maybe we all are God, existing and experiencing ourselves subjectively. And again, this is not original. This is Bernard Haysh's idea. It's a guy called Martin W. Ball's entheological paradigm. It's something that Spinoza said. So it's nothing original. All I'm doing is, there's very little I do that's original. But what I do is I synthesize what other people have written and try to come up with something new.
Now, Mani, he believed that when there was, he has a myth, basically there's a primal man that's generated by the Great Father to fight the powers of darkness, because the powers of darkness decide to invade the realm of light. But what happens is during this struggle, I guess the powers of darkness overcome this primal man, and this primal man is shattered into different light sparks, divine sparks, and basically divine sparks become enmeshed in the darkness, and then so through this infusion of light and dark, our material universe is born out of that. So the whole thing about at the end of time, or according to Mani's eschatology, there's going to be a perfect man where all the divine sparks are put back together. It's kind of like goes back to the idea of Paul, where he talks about the body of Christ. It's a very kind of Paul.
The second Adam.
Yeah, the second Adam. So after that, after this ascension, I guess the realms between light and darkness are separated once again. So I think that kind of corresponds to what you're saying a little bit.
To a certain extent, very much. To a certain extent, very much. Can you say that? I suppose you can't, can you? But it's coming back to
it makes sense.
The Kabbalah's idea of Adam Kadmon, and the idea of the original man, and the idea that the original man, as you say, is shattered into tiny shards, and these shards end up inside each human being, but we're not aware of the fact that we have the shard of the pleroma inside us. Now, again, there is a Philip K. Dick novel called Galactic Pot Healer, I think, and in that he very much discusses this whole Kabbalistic concept of the idea of the shards that are shattered, the pot that's been shattered that needs to be put back together again. Now, effectively, this is an interesting argument, isn't it? So, effectively, the shards all come back together again, and the original singularity is created, the original Godhead. I hate using the word God because it's so pejorative, and it's not a term I like to use, but we have to inevitably come back to the fact of what is the ground state of everything, and could it be that yes, we've been shattered and we're coming back together again as an individual, and again, I think if you read, there is a guy that I'm a great admirer of called Rabbi Joel Baxt. Again, you need to get Rabbi Joel Baxt on here. I mean, he would blow your mind. He's absolutely amazing guy. And Joel has written a series of books about the nature of the Kabbalah and how it links to DNA, how it links to the way in which the brain is structured. And he has actually evidence that within the Torah there is evidence of DNA within the Torah, the way the Torah is described. So clearly, that there are, our ancestors were incredibly wise people.
Well, yeah, there's pi in the Gospel of John. If you actually do it by gematria and you take every single number or every letter and turn it into a number, in the oldest copy of it, it reads as pi.
Wow.
It was the longest computation of pi in the ancient world.
Well, that's the whole thing, isn't it, about the Kabbalah, is that the letters mean something. Each letter has a meaning, and it can be read in so many different ways, and I'm very much fascinated by this, and I know very little about it, but I know...
The Gnostics did that too. They did that with it's Ephesians 6, Genesis 3, I believe, and there's another passage, I think it's Revelation 12, the myth of Sophia, and the actual aeons, the names of the aeons are embedded in all three of those.
Wow.
They're all related passages. Actually, Revelation 12 and Ephesians 6 is modeled after Genesis 3.
This is
they
what
add up the same way.
This stuff absolutely amazes me. One of the things when I was writing Mindfield, I was amazed at things I was actually finding, and there's one section where I take it right back to ancient Sumer, and you can see the ideas coming out from ancient Sumer, heading along what we now know as the Silk Road, to actually see Taoism, to actually Buddhism, Hinduism, back again into Egypt, and you got the sacred geometry of the buildings in Egypt and everything else.
Pythagoreanism, all that stuff.
Oh, and it just goes on, and then you get into the Pythagoreans, and particularly I'm incredibly fascinated by the Greek mystery cults, and the drinking of the substance kykeon, which is clearly soma, which is discussed in the Middle East, and how this works with, and soma probably is haoma. So you have all these fascinating things going on, and they're all linked. You can go into any single mystic tradition, and if you know the code and you see what they're discussing, I feel that, I'm not being vain here, but I do find it amazing how my work is linking all these things together. And sometimes I sit back and I go, Jesus Christ, how? What is it? Why me? Why now? Why what? Because people who know me as Anthony Why Me Peake, because I have no bloody clue why these things I'm finding out, but they make sense, and they make so much sense that maybe this is it. I'm existing in my own Groundhog Day life, and my reason is to discover my reason for being here. So the very fact that I discover the reason why the universe is here within my own phaneron, within my own illusion of life, that's not at all surprising, because that's what I'm here to do. So therefore, you're just emanations of my psychology that are here to facilitate my thought. In order,
right.
And it's the same.
You sound like Simon Magus right now. And it's funny because when Simon Magus said things like that, everyone thought he was a narcissist.
Yeah, and
they all thought that, and I'm like, I don't even feel like I don't feel like we're being that way, but I can see how people they might trip out. Do people ever think? Do they say things like that to you? Like, oh, you're being such a narcissist, Anthony. What do you mean we're here to facilitate?
I don't, because I don't think I've ever really said that before. Because
good, okay, just making sure.
In general terms, I think that's what we're all here to do. We're all.
If I talk like that, people think I'm a narcissist.
Well, most people out there will think we are, because they don't.
Yeah.
And it's being vain, and it's not meant to be vain, but they just don't think deeply enough. And I know that sounds like an incredible put down, and it's not.
I know.
It's like we were doing before about the explanator of the hallucination.
Right.
If the answer, hallucination is somebody who's seeing things that aren't there. So if you and I see the thing that's not there, it's a folie à deux. And that's the term they use. So therefore they've explained the fact that two people have seen it. If a whole crowd of people see something, it's a collective delusion. But we all see the universe around us. So is this not a collective delusion? But they never extrapolate that far. So far, and they stop. And that irritates me, and I get quite annoyed about that worldview.
That irritates me too. I've had that a lot in discussions with people. I mean, if everyone sees it empirically, it must be true, right? It must have actually happened. It must have actually been witnessed.
Yeah, so if people don't see something, it's empirically untrue. So that gorilla technically doesn't exist until it's seen.
Empirical science has been pretty under attack since the 1920s, though, and especially in the disciplines of psychology. Well, psychology, there was a famous psychologist, I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but there's a famous psychologist who put forward a new type of way of doing science rather than doing empirical science.
I think the problem with psychology is that there are some psychologists like William James and people like that were incredibly revolutionary, but psychology seemed to, in the 1930s, 40s and 50s, get so wound up with becoming a science that it became more materialist reductionist than physics. Physics now is nearer to philosophy than anything else, whereas psychology and biology are stuck in this materialist reductionist loop. There was a guy called Talcott Parsons who brought it in, because my background, I'm a sociologist by background, and Talcott Parsons brought in functional sociology. And you then had social psychology, social psychiatry, whereby we are not thinking entities, we're just part of a swarm. We react, we salivate when we hear a bell. This is what we do, the Pavlovian response mechanism. This is what we do. But of course that doesn't explain motivation. It doesn't explain empathy. It doesn't explain a lot of the things that human beings do. And it damn well doesn't explain the idea of whatever's inside my head and what makes me think the way I do. I'm aware of time, guys. How are we doing on time?
We're probably about to wrap it up. It's about 8:40. We've been on almost 2 hours.
Yeah.
Excellent. Oh, it's good.
So we got a long discussion, so that's good.
You know, we haven't even scratched the surface yet. Believe me, we haven't.
I know we haven't.
Okay, well, thanks again for you know, we'll do it again soon. And thanks again. Let me know when it's up on YouTube and everything else. Because I was
feel
amazed.
Free to copy it to any page you want to copy it to too.
Well, I was amazed how quickly it went up last time, but I suppose this is what you can do with Google Plus, isn't it?
Oh yeah, sometimes it goes up sometimes it goes up immediately after it's done. Sometimes it takes 4 hours.
Okay.
So.
Okay,
I
well,
don't know exactly when it'll be up, but feel free to embed it in your website or wherever you want to put it.
Okay, and if you guys can get involved on my forum as well, it'll be really good.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a whole section on Gnosticism, and I really want to get it started. I want to get it off Facebook and onto something that's more permanent. Because there's some great
sure. And I still have your Facebook message telling me where the forum's at too, so I'll do that.
Excellent, great. Okay, well, thanks again for letting me crowd in on your own individual fanerons, and let's.
All right, well, it was good to have you, Anthony. Thank you for coming by.
Okay, see you again.
There are 2 interviews. That's awesome.
Okay. Okay then.
I'd love to have
All right,
you have for a third one.
No, well, maybe
we will.
We'll do a trilogy at some time in the future. Yeah. You know, the Matrix.
Yeah, guaranteed. You got it.
Yeah. Okay.
However many times you want to be on, you're always welcome.
Yeah, great.
All right.
Enjoy. Okay, see you guys.